With any major change, criticism is expected.
And with transit being the city's third biggest expense, getting it right is crucial. So we're going to delve a little deeper into the bus network changes as we bring in an outside expert to offer some perspective. Feature interview coming up right after the break.
You're watching Global News at Noon.
Well, time will tell if the city's revamped bus network will get new people to consider taking transit.
Right now, it continues to be a bit of a bumpy ride as current ETS customers get used to all the new changes. Joining us now is David Cooper, a transit planning consultant.
And now he wasn't involved with the changes in Edmonton, but has been involved with bus network revamps elsewhere like Calgary. David, welcome. Why don't we start with more complaints than kudos right now? Did Edmonton need to change its bus system? And it is a system you've used before.
So growing up in Edmonton, definitely spent many years taking Edmonton Transit. This is the most significant bus system redesign in Canada. It's actually the third one in Edmonton. There was one in the 70s for the introduction of the LRT. There was one back in the mid-90s dealing with service reliability because the routes were crisscrossing the city. And this one's very much about working to improve ridership. The system outgrew itself and it was quite oriented to the suburbs, and different types of services were invested for a high frequency network, and it's shaping and evolving with Edmonton.
You know, David, it's still early days, obviously, but should Edmonton Transit be prepared to make changes sooner rather than later if these initial complaints continue?
So it takes time to familiarize yourself with a whole brand new bus system. And work that I've done in other cities such as Calgary, it's very common to get complaints, but there's also things that are working well for people. It takes a year to really see how the system works. We're changing something that is a service that people use every day. It's changing a daily routine. But I think what we need to remember was this was a very public process in the routes. Figuring out the type of system that the city needs, and there was a lot of communication that was done. If you look at the thousands of bus stops that were changed all across Edmonton, there was actually decals and panels out there saying that this is going to happen in April, and it's time to take a look at what's going to happen. But it is typical to hear some complaints and you know, minor adjustments, yes, but we need to see how the system functions over a one-year period.
So 1 year, so we'll keep that in mind. Maybe we'll bookmark. We'll talk to you a year from now. In the meantime, we've seen, David, part of this is an introduction of an on-demand service through a private operator. Is that a case of Edmonton breaking new ground there, or do you think that's the way of the future?
So Edmonton broke ground in terms of the scale and size of its on-demand transit service. There's only a finite amount of funding to provide different transit service hours across the city, and there was a trade-off between ridership and coverage. And what Edmonton has done is really try to make it as easy as possible for folks to use their phone to book a trip on the on-demand transit to connect to regular high-frequency type services. And that's something that Edmonton has really pushed more further ahead than most other Canadian cities, but it is a technology that we're seeing in cities across Canada. And Edmonton has just taken it up a little bit more to really feed into that high-frequency network.
You know, one of the end games here is to increase transit ridership. You know, is that the main metric we should be looking at in terms of determining if all these changes are actually successful?
Looking at ridership is definitely one main metric. You want to have a service that's quite attractive to Edmontonians to take, but also this service was also designed, in fact, of other projects that are coming online. Valley Line Southeast is going to open later this year, and these routes are now reoriented to feed into that, so the transition for Valley Line will be a lot easier. There's also pieces of the system that were also designed to accommodate construction of Line West, so that way there's less changes in the future to provide that accommodation. But in terms of ridership is definitely important, but also the reliability of service, which we've seen in some of the future proofing of the network that went live on Sunday.
Definitely will give us something to watch for as that feedback rolls in. David, thanks so much for making time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.